Ford, and I'm one of 5 recruit program coordinators at the Connecticut Fire Academy working in the Recruit Firefighter Program. Our intention with this video is to cover the 4 main areas in which you will be expected to perform and then measured while you're in attendance at the Academy. The first area is the cognitive area, which most people know as academics. That's the classroom work. The second is the psychomotor area, or the practical skills area, which is the material covered out on the training ground. The third is professional demeanor, or your attitude, behavior, and conduct, and that's in the affective domain. A little harder for most folks to measure, however, we have a system here at the Academy in which to measure that. The last is work capacity, and that's measured as physical fitness. All 4 of these areas are specifically intended to teach you certain things, but also have overlaps in other areas. It's critical that you know these areas and how best to prepare for them. For instance, in the academics, you have to learn prior to arrival at the Academy how best you learn, what tools, techniques, and means you have with which to better prepare for your studies while you're here. In terms of the psychomotor, the practical skills area, this is where you have to determine, if you have prior fire service experience, what you learned in Firefighter 1 and 2 or any other trainings, and how best you learn those things and how you can apply those techniques to your training here. If you have no prior firefighter experience, you have to learn the demands of the fire service. You can do some research online and find out what the fire profession demands, and then figure out for yourself what will be required. For instance, in that area, we commonly find that people don't have the requisite mechanical aptitude that's required for our profession. If you don't, those are things you're going to want to learn about yourself and how best to prepare for it. The third area, that affective domain of your professional demeanor, in that regard, you're going to have to do some research on the fire service profession if you don't know it already, and learn that we follow a chain of command and that we have high expectations around our behavior. So attitude, behavior, and conduct will be critical to your performance here. The last area, the work capacity or physical fitness, is the area that probably has the most impact on the other areas. For instance, if you're not physically capable, it affects your studies. You're tired at night, you don't get to study as well, and then you don't perform as well academically. It also affects your ability on the training ground when you're performing multiple tasks. If you're not prepared for it, you're tired and you don't perform quite so well. If those 2 areas don't work so well, then your attitude, behavior, and conduct will suffer as well. In that regard, people often assume that CPAT is adequate preparation. CPAT for us means that you're now prepared to be trained, but aren't yet at a level of proficiency that's required for the profession. In that regard, we're going to want you to, many weeks or months before you attend the Academy, begin to prepare. We're expecting that you're going to perform calisthenic body weight exercises prior to your arrival and perform some sort of cardiorespiratory training that would include running or biking on the roadway. We emphasize the running because that's one means with which we train while you're here, and if you're not prepared for the impact of the roadway, you may develop overuse or musculoskeletal injuries. So those are the 4 areas in which you're going to be measured, and those are the 4 areas in which you're going to train. We have the brightest instructors in the region, and you're going to use the most modern materials and equipment to do it. What follows on this video are those specific areas broken down and how best to prepare for your Academy training. Thank you for watching, and please call if you have any additional questions. So to begin with academics, it's probably important to tell you the redundancy that we have built into the system for the retention of the information. For instance, the way that the academic elements of the program work are that you'll have to read the chapter material, and this is all printed out in a schedule, so there's all sorts of predictability built into it. But the beginning part of that is reading the academic material. From there, you'll then complete homework, generally that same time that you've completed the reading. Next to follow that is the presentation in the classroom. So you'll have read the chapter, you've completed the homework, you come into the classroom and you submit your homework, and then you get the classroom delivery. That's the didactic portion of the academics. From there, on a subsequent day, you'll be off on the training ground performing those skills. And most of the academic sections have a corresponding skill section to them as well. On a subsequent day to the practical skills session, on another classroom day, you'll then be quizzed on that material from that chapter or that unit. So there's really multiple layers to the retention of that information. It's important for you to know, though, in terms of the preparation before you get here, as we talked about in that last section, that it's incumbent upon you to know your learning style. We'll provide you, for instance, with an operations manual. In the operations manual, we have study tips, suggestions, we have ideas for reading and retention. We'll promote ideas around study groups and how to best prepare for the academic material that you'll get. However, you have to know that before you come here. What most recruits are not familiar with is the volume of the material. To give you an idea, we run the academics on a trimester basis. That's the Recruit program. The 70 days will run on about 5 weeks each of 3 trimesters. During that time, each of those periods has some 20 to 30 quizzes and 20 to 30 homeworks. Now you can imagine, in order for us to generate 20 homeworks and 20 quizzes, or 25 or 30, that the number of pages that go with that material is vast. So someone has to determine very early on how they manage their time. So it's not only a matter of their study skills, it's how you manage your time. There's 168 hours in every week. When you arrive for Recruit on Monday morning and then you leave Friday night, that's only a large portion of the week, but it's not the entire week. So one has to know before they arrive at the Recruit program how best to prepare for the rigors of the program when they get here. Regarding the psychomotor skills, we're going to build off the academics and the cognitive domain. Once you've read the chapter, and then you've done the homework, and then you come in for the didactic or classroom portion, you're then going to go outside on a subsequent day to perform the psychomotor skills or practical skills. Fairly easy to do because of the trajectory that we've laid out and the redundancy we've built in. It's important to know, however, prior to your arrival at the academy, again, your learning style in the psychomotor skills area as it relates to the cognitive area. For instance, if I read the chapter on the self-contained breathing apparatus, the air packs that we wear on our backs when we go into an IDLH atmosphere, we call it, I can read that. At the same time, though, I will need to conceptualize what that will mean when I go out on the training ground in terms of the placing it on my back, putting the regulator in so I'm breathing off of the tank off my back. All of those connections have to be made while I'm doing the academic portion or those areas in the cognitive domain. So when we look at those psychomotor skills, the practical skills, they have to follow the academic areas of cognitive domain and the classroom work. There's no way that we can do anything differently than that. This is not uncommon for what we'll find in the fire service as well. For instance, there are always new procedures, new policies, new techniques, and they always begin with reading exactly how they're done and then practicing them and then perfecting them. So in terms of preparation before you arrive at the academy, knowing your learning style, knowing your competencies in certain areas that might be similar. Have you worked with wrenches before, hammers before, other kinds of tools? Have you run a chainsaw before? And then determine for yourself how best you acquire that information and then hone those skills. Many athletes can make the connection from their athletic background to the fire service in those same means. They might learn how to do something, watch how something's done, then try it for themselves and then practice it. But what you have to know prior to getting here is that is probably one of the most critical areas, because we can't have firefighters who are simply cognitively capable, they're book smart, for instance, versus street smart. We have to have a combination of the two. So in terms of the preparation, you learn your styles, your predispositions, what has worked for you in the past in other areas, either closely connected or not, and then you refine those prior to your arrival here. Once here, and again, the emphasis of this video is prior to arriving on the campus, but once here, the other real important piece is to get every opportunity and take every opportunity to practice to perform those skills. If you happen to be coming from a fire department already, you're a volunteer, you're serving your community in that capacity, it's very, very helpful if beforehand you can seek an experienced mentor to help you to do some of those things and then learn how to practice things for perfection. In our third broad focus area, professional demeanor, as I said in the prior segment, this one's a little more difficult for most folks to wrap their hands around. And that's because most people can't determine how, in fact, you would evaluate these areas. For us, we look at attitude, behavior, and conduct. So for instance, you say, well, how would somebody determine my attitude? Really, we look back toward the behavior and the conduct, and then we look for patterns of those behaviors and conducts to determine somebody's attitude. This is one of the hardest areas in terms of teaching somebody how best to prepare before they arrive. In that regard, what you really have to know is what causes you to be under stress, and then how you react to that stress. For instance, if you're stressed in some way, shape, or form, it affects your ability to think with great clarity. And when you don't think with great clarity, you create more frustration. And when you have frustration within yourself, you tend to behave different. So your behavior and conduct will be compromised. So first you have to know how you handle stress and pressure. You start with other academic environments. Even if they didn't include a military or fire service experience, most folks will know from middle school and high school how they performed under pressure in final exams and things like that. So in terms of preparation for that, that's where you start. In addition to that, you really have to start to understand now from this video and other means how best you combine all of those other three categories. We've already covered, for instance, the cognitive, which is the academics, and the psychomotor or practical skills. What you have to know in terms of the attitude, behavior, and conduct, and ultimately your professional demeanor, is if you're not better prepared or as best prepared as you can be in those first two, the third one here will suffer. For instance, if I'm not studying as well as I need to, I'm not managing my time as well as I need to, and then I don't perform very well on the quizzes and the homeworks. I then go out into the training ground and I'm not as academically prepared as I should be, and therefore my psychomotor skills or the practical skills that I'm performing out on the training ground suffer. Ultimately, over time, that can be demoralizing. It's not necessarily an unexpected thing. However, it will affect attitude, behavior, and conduct and professional demeanor. So you have to know how those three are tied together, and when we get into the work capacity here at the end, we'll cover that a little more. But that's where they're tied together, and you will be measured through attitude, behavior, and conduct. It's called professional demeanor, and in that regard, nobody gets a free pass because we have measurement tools on how exactly we're going to do that. We'll best prepare you once you get here, but you're best suited to prepare yourself before your arrival. The last of the four main areas is work capacity. This is the one that you can best prepare for prior to your arrival because it doesn't take any prior knowledge. Nearly everyone knows how to do a push-up and a squat or a lunge or some kind of physical activity, whether it's from a sports background or from gym classes in elementary school. But it is also the one that you need the most time to prepare for. The way that our physical fitness program here is developed is we have baseline testing in the beginning after we cover some form and technique issues that we anticipate we'll have if we don't cover them. We do some baseline testing, and then lesson plans are written on a weekly basis to create a trajectory of a baseline level of fitness all the way through a firefighter who's ready for the rigors of firefighting on the line at a firehouse as a professional firefighter, whether that's an unpaid professional or a professional. So for instance, every week, generally speaking, Mondays and Thursdays are strength and endurance focused, and then Tuesdays and Fridays are cardiorespiratory focused, and then Wednesday is either an aquatic program or a functional day. Now I give that to you as a general rule because as the program commences, we change some of those days according to the class schedule as well. For instance, if there's a particularly challenging day out on the training ground with practical skills, we might change the PT schedule that week to accommodate the more rigorous training day. However, in any event, you know that you have to come here prepared. Most people inappropriately assume that CPAT is going to be sufficient conditioning. What CPAT was designed for was entry-level testing. What that tells us here at the Connecticut Fire Academy is you are ready to be trained. But we want to go one step further. We want to tell you that prior to your arrival, and we're talking 2-3 months and longer if you're not already an athlete or you're not pursuing athletic endeavors, we want you to start to do calisthenic-based exercise and cardiorespiratory exercises, but in combination as well. When all is said and done, by the time you arrive here, you should be able to do bodyweight push-ups and bodyweight squats and pull-ups. So a bodyweight pull-up with an overhand grip, opposing thumb. For each of those, you should be able to do at least 10 to 15 bodyweight push-ups, 10 to 15 bodyweight squats, and at least 4 or 5 pull-ups. In addition to that, you ought to be able to sustain a 1.5 mile run at a 10-minute per mile pace. So you should be able to do a 1.5 mile run at a minimum within 15 minutes. We will train you to run faster than that and farther than that, but on the first day of your arrival, that's the minimum level of expectation that we have, and gives us the best opportunity for your success. Well, this concludes this short video presentation on how best you can prepare before your arrival in the Connecticut Fire Academy's Recruit Firefighter Program. Please know that we will provide you with the best materials, the best equipment, and the best instructors for your success. It's incumbent upon you to come prepared and have the best attitude toward your training over the subsequent 70 days. Remember, whether you've been hired by a career department or you're being supported by a volunteer fire department, your first day in recruit training is the beginning of your career. We need you to perform all day, every day, as though this is your first day on the job and you really wanted this job. It's the most important thing to you. We won't fail you. Don't you fail yourselves. Thank you.